what happens in their mind the moment you stop showing up. When the messages stop, when the door stays closed, when your voice, once predictable, simply fades into quiet. They used to scoff at your patience, confuse your consistency with dependence, and treat your presence like air. Always available, never questioned. But absence is not emptiness, it is revelation. It is in your silence that they first begin to hear the echo of everything they ignored. And in that echo, discomfort stirs. Not because you said something cruel, but because you finally said nothing. You see, we often believe that walking away is an act of surrender, but in truth, it is the most powerful form of clarity. It disrupts the game. It forces those who once believed they had control to face a mirror they cannot shatter. This isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming your presence by removing it. And when you do, what they feel is not loss, it is exposure. In this video, we'll explore the emotional storm that begins the moment you step back. Stay with me. What you'll discover may change the way you understand power forever. 1. Confusion and inner searching. When you walk away without warning, the first thing they feel is confusion. A silence descends where your presence used to be, and it unsettles them. They begin to search for meaning in the smallest things you ever said or did. They replay conversations in their minds, dissecting your glances, your pauses, your quiet departures, hoping to identify the moment they lost their grip on you. But confusion soon gives way to a deeper ache, guilt. Not the guilt that comes from true reflection or remorse, but the kind born from sudden loss. They remember the kindness you gave so easily, the time you never charged for, the loyalty you poured into empty hands, and now they see it clearly because it is gone. The truth is, people rarely value what feels permanent. When your presence was constant, when your support could be assumed, they stopped noticing. Familiarity does not breed contempt. It breeds blindness. When something or someone is always there, the mind stops recognizing its worth. You became part of the background, reliable but invisible, a presence taken for granted, like a pillar holding up the ceiling, vital but unacknowledged. And now that you have removed yourself, they feel the weight of your absence, the imbalance you left behind. What they once considered ordinary now echoes with meaning. What they once dismissed now haunts them in silence. And, for the first time, they begin to realize they never really knew your worth until you were gone. 2. Guilt. The first shadow of your absence. When a man who was once always present suddenly withdraws, his absence does not create distance, it creates a mirror. But it's not a mirror pointed at him, it reflects the ones he left behind. And in that mirror, people are confronted not with his silence, but with their own behavior. At first, they may feel irritation or confusion, but what soon follows is something far more uncomfortable: awareness. A dawning realization that the comfort they enjoyed was not free, that the support they leaned on was someone else's sacrifice, and that what they once dismissed as ordinary was, in fact, rare. It was never your confrontation that taught them this. It was your absence, because presence often makes people lazy in their judgment. They measure by convenience. But absence sharpens memory, and memory has no filter. It shows the truth without flattery. They begin to look back not with affection, but with inventory. They assess what you offered, how easily you gave, how consistent you were in your loyalty. Suddenly, the small things you did become monumental. The conversations that once filled idle hours now feel like gold dust they failed to collect. The favors you gave without asking for anything in return now seem almost regal in their generosity. These were not obligations, they were gifts, strategic missteps, perhaps, but freely given treasures nonetheless. And when such a giver walks away, people are left with more than emptiness. They are left with the weight of their own blindness. This is not guilt rooted in morality. It is a sharper kind of guilt, born from the recognition of loss that cannot be undone. They are not mourning you out of love. They are recalculating their lives now that you are no longer part of the equation. It is not regret for how they treated you. It is fear of how they must now proceed without what you once provided. And that fear, masked as guilt, is the first consequence of your quiet departure. 3. Their story of your weakness. When you were always present, always offering your time and loyalty without demand, they convinced themselves that you needed them. Your patience was mistaken for dependence, your understanding for submission. They labeled your consistency as weakness because in their limited view, only those who chase must need something. But everything shifts the moment you walk away. Suddenly, the one they thought would never leave is gone. And in that silence, a new story begins to emerge, not told by words, but by the void itself. Now they are left not with your presence to criticize, but with their own reflection to confront. And the image staring back is one they can hardly bear. Because what if you were never the weak one? What if all along you were the foundation beneath their confidence, the quiet force keeping things from collapsing? What if your presence was the structure they leaned on, and now without it, they realize just how fragile they are? This is the brutal clarity of absence. It strips away the illusions people build to feel superior. It interrupts their fantasy that you were the one holding on, because now they must wrestle with the truth. The real need was never yours, it was theirs, and the silence you leave behind becomes louder than any argument ever could. It unsettles the air, creates a vacuum they cannot fill, and reminds them that some presences only reveal their value once they are gone. Threats mean nothing. Words can be manipulated, but absence cannot be denied. It is felt in the bones. It rewrites their narrative not with accusation, but with undeniable fact. You were not weak, you were essential. And now that you are no longer there, they can no longer pretend otherwise. 4. Silent rage and lost control. There is a particular kind of fury that arises not from confrontation, but from silence, when you no longer respond, when your presence is no longer theirs to summon, when your voice no longer bends to their demands. A slow and painful realization begins to take root. Only in your absence do they truly start to calculate your worth. Reflection does not flourish in the noise of arguments or the back and forth of excuses. It grows in the void, and in that void, their mind begins to stir. They hear again what you once said, but now those words arrive with weight. The glances, the gestures, the boundaries you once set, all dismissed in the moment, now return like echoes in a chamber they cannot escape. What once irritated them now disturbs them. What once made them feel dominant now leaves them feeling stripped and exposed. They start to piece together what they failed to see before, the steady things they overlooked, the moments they labeled insignificant, the stability they thought was guaranteed. And now that all of it is gone, what remains is not just silence, but a growing awareness that they never truly understood the value of what they had. They believed you would never leave, that your patience was limitless, that your presence was fixed, and now, confronted with your absence, their reality fractures. The person they once thought they could control is no longer within reach. You have become more than just someone they lost. You have become a symbol of what they failed to appreciate, and that is where the rage begins, not directed outward, but swirling within them, because the power dynamic has collapsed, not through conflict, but through retreat. You stepped off the stage, and the entire play fell apart. They are left holding the script, but without a co-star, the story no longer makes sense. Now they must sit in the quiet and face a truth they refuse to see. Not that you disappeared, but that they never really had control to begin with. 5. The failure to replace you. One of the greatest illusions people cling to is the belief that the one who stays is the one who holds the power. They confuse proximity with dominance, mistaking your continued presence as a form of surrender. They believe that by staying near, by responding, by showing up, you are agreeing to the rules of their game. But true power does not reside in obedience. It is not built on endurance. It is revealed in your ability to step back without rage, to walk away without noise, and to let your silence speak truths that words never could. To withdraw is not weakness, it is authority. It is the quiet declaration that you no longer accept a position that diminishes your worth. In walking away, you dismantle the illusion that they ever had control. You do not explain. You do not plead. You do not ask to be seen differently. You simply leave. And in that departure, you change the entire dynamic, because power is not in the hands of the one who talks the most or stays the longest. It belongs to the one who has the courage to leave the game altogether. What they fail to grasp is that your presence was never just time. It was currency. Every moment you gave was an offering, every word, every effort, a form of investment, and like any wise investor, you reserve the right to withdraw when the return no longer justifies the cost. The moment you exit, you take everything with you, your energy, your support, your stability, your value, and they are left standing in the aftermath, scrambling to replace what they never even learned to appreciate. But replacements never work, because they were not drawn to you for convenience. They were drawn to the quality of your presence, the depth of what you brought, and once that is gone, imitation cannot fill the void. They may find someone else, but they will never find another you. And that, more than your absence, is what haunts them most. 6. Absence as the ultimate mirror. Real control does not arise from conflict, it emerges from distance. As long as you are emotionally involved, you are readable. Your reactions can be anticipated, your energy can be manipulated, but the moment you step away and choose stillness over engagement, you enter a domain most people fear and few ever master. The domain of indifference. Indifference is not coldness, it is power. It is the quiet statement that someone no longer has influence over your inner world. Hatred still acknowledges the other's presence. Indifference dissolves it. When you walk away and do not look back, you stop being a character in their story. You become a mirror they must face alone, and in that mirror, they are not confronted by you, but by their own inadequacy. Their need for your reaction goes unmet. Their old tactics fall flat. Every scenario they once controlled by drawing you in becomes useless. Now they speak to silence. They provoke shadows. They act on a stage that has lost its audience. And in that vacuum, they are forced to wrestle with the one thing they cannot manipulate: your absence. You hold all the leverage not by doing more, but by doing nothing, not needing to explain, to justify, or to return gives you the kind of power they cannot imitate. This is the highest form of strength, not in your ability to win a battle, but in your refusal to play a rigged game. By exiting without drama, without rage, without even a warning, you assert a quiet verdict. You judge the situation unworthy of your presence. And your departure is the sentence. They no longer know how to reach you. And more painfully, they no longer know how to predict you. That is what makes you powerful. Not because you demanded respect, but because you denied them the script they depended on. You have become undefined, and in that ambiguity, you gain a freedom and force they cannot contain. 7. Your value rises in absence. There is a strange kind of torment that begins not when you fight back, but when you walk away in silence. The absence of words, the refusal to explain, becomes more piercing than any confrontation ever could. They are left to guess, to project, to obsess over what you might be thinking, what you might be planning, and most importantly, why you are not returning. Each day that passes without your voice becomes a reckoning. Each hour you remain silent becomes a signal that they no longer have access to what they once took for granted. And as access fades, value rises. What is no longer available becomes precious. What is no longer close becomes revered. This is the psychology of power. Control is not measured by presence, it is measured by impact, and your absence begins to speak louder than your presence ever did. You are no longer the one reaching out, no longer seeking affirmation or understanding. You become the one they must now approach, the one they must now measure their words around, and each time they hesitate, each time they attempt to re-enter your space and find only silence, they are reminded that the terms have changed. You did not beg, you did not plead, you simply left. And that kind of departure is not seen as emotional retreat, but as strategic control. Even those who once dismissed you begin to adjust. Their tone becomes softer, their narratives shift. They speak of you with caution, because deep down they recognize what they lost was not someone weak, but someone they failed to comprehend. To walk away when others expect you to stay is not cowardice, it is clarity. It is the realization that your worth is not proven in presence, but in withdrawal. And that simple act, done without noise or need, makes you unforgettable and, to them, dangerously untouchable. 8. Desperate attempts to reclaim control. When you finally walk away, you don't just create space, you dismantle an illusion. The structure they built around your reliability, your silence, your emotional availability begins to tremble. Your absence is not merely a missing body in the room. It is the absence of energy they once fed on. It is the quiet collapse of a dynamic they thought they controlled. Those who once took your presence for granted are now forced to deal with something they never prepared for. Your decision to leave without explanation, without apology, without looking back. At first, they may feel unsettled, confused, even slightly amused, expecting you to return, as you always did. But when your silence stretches from hours into days, from days into distance, unease turns into recognition. That recognition is painful. Not because they truly understand what they lost, but because they are beginning to feel the impact of no longer having access to what they once dominated. And so it begins, the scramble to reclaim what slipped through their hands. It starts with guilt, but not the kind born from genuine remorse. This is strategic guilt, the guilt of someone who realizes that a resource is gone, and with it, their sense of control. They do not feel sorry for how they treated you. They feel sorry that they didn't predict your departure. They recall the times they dismissed your boundaries, mocked your patience, minimized your efforts. And now, those memories sting, not because they've grown, but because they misjudged your capacity to leave. Yet, guilt alone rarely produces humility. In those who are ruled by ego, guilt transforms into anger. They begin to resent your absence, not because you harmed them, but because your detachment makes them feel powerless. You were meant to be the steady one, the predictable one, the loyal one. By walking away, you violated the silent script they wrote for you, and so anger surfaces, not as justice, but as entitlement. You were supposed to stay. Your strength offends them because it exposes their own weakness. Unable to process this loss with dignity, they begin rewriting the story. They label your silence as cruelty. They call your clarity cold. They twist your boundaries into betrayal. These are not accurate reflections. They are desperate distortions, because if they can recast you as the villain, they don't have to face the fact that they lost someone irreplaceable through their own negligence. Reframing the narrative becomes their defense mechanism. They paint you in false colors so they can remain the misunderstood victim. But beneath the guilt and anger, beneath the accusations and manipulation, there is something deeper, more primal: fear. Not the fear of you, but the fear of your freedom, because your departure signals something terrifying to those who depended on your presence to feel significant. It reveals that they were never in control, that what they thought was power was actually proximity. And now that you are gone, they realize how little they actually had. This fear expresses itself in strange ways. They may try to contact you indirectly. They may engage mutual acquaintances to speak on their behalf. They may post vague messages aimed at pulling you back into their orbit. These gestures are not signs of growth. They are signs of desperation. What they cannot control, they must provoke. What they cannot hold, they must haunt. They do not want reconciliation. They want reinstatement. They want the version of you who stayed too long, gave too much, and asked too little. But that version of you is gone, and every attempt they make to bring you back only reveals the truth they fear the most, that your silence is not temporary, and your absence is not a tactic. It is a transformation. You did not walk away to hurt them, you walked away to find yourself. And now that you have, you cannot be summoned. You cannot be baited. You cannot be guilted into returning to a place that once asked you to shrink in order to belong. What they feel now is not just the loss of you. It is the loss of their ability to define you, and that is a kind of power they will never get back. 9. Inner sovereignty. There is a kind of authority that does not require volume. It is not declared through speeches or earned through argument. True power reveals itself in the quiet act of walking away. It is the calm withdrawal from a world too distracted to realize what it has lost. When you remove your voice, not in anger, but in clarity, you send a message far more powerful than any confrontation could deliver. Your silence becomes the signal. A silence that unsettles, that lingers, that forces others to finally confront themselves. While your presence once gave them something to push against, your absence now gives them nothing to fight, nothing to control, nothing to manipulate. And that nothingness is where your strength begins. You no longer provide emotional fuel. You no longer serve as the predictable figure in their personal drama. You remove yourself from the script entirely. And in doing so, you disrupt the entire narrative. Suddenly, they are left with empty space where your energy used to be. That absence is not passive, it is an active force. It creates imbalance, it triggers reflection, it exposes dependency. Your silence becomes sacred. Pinom, amstantas setiers. No longer something they can extract at will. It was once given freely, and now it is gone. And when something rare disappears, the mind begins to obsess over its return. What they once dismissed now haunts them. What they once controlled now controls them. As you retreat, they scramble. They search for signs. They dissect your last words. Analyze your silence. Project meaning into your absence. Their mind becomes loud, filled with doubt, insecurity, and unease. This is the cost of neglecting what once supported them. You do not need to remind them of what they lost. Your absence does that for you, and as time passes, something even more powerful takes place. You become imagined. Your value grows not by display, but by distance. In the vacuum you leave behind, they project strength, clarity, and peace onto you, not because they have evidence, but because they no longer have access. In their confusion, they give you power, not through truth, but through speculation. People fear what they cannot define. They know how to confront noise, how to debate anger, but they do not know how to fight indifference. When you're quiet, there is no reaction to exploit, no tone to twist, no weakness to expose. They are left with only themselves, and what they see in that reflection often terrifies them. In the court of public perception, the one who remains composed is seen as more in control. The one who exits with dignity is remembered with respect, and those who remain to argue only reveal how little power they ever had. Your name begins to appear in whispers. You become not a presence, but a symbol a symbol of something they failed to understand until it was too late. Their attempts to reach you will not always look desperate. Sometimes they will be dressed in reconciliation, cloaked in regret, disguised as emotional honesty. But listen carefully. You will notice what is missing. Real accountability. Instead of meeting you where you are, they will try to return you to who you were, to the version of you that accepted less, tolerated more, and stayed silent for the sake of peace. And when that does not work, they will provoke. They will try to insult you, belittle you, bait you, not out of hatred, but out of desperation. Because if they can get you to respond, they can get you back into the game. And once you are back, they can control the rules again. But the Stoic path is clear. Do not return. Do not defend. Do not explain. Your absence is not just escape. It is transformation. You are no longer the person who tolerated what was never worthy of you. You are no longer trying to fix a structure built on imbalance. You are now the architect of your own peace, and the more they try to pull you back, the more visible your independence becomes. You did not abandon them, you simply chose yourself, and in doing so, you revealed their fear. Not fear of losing you, but fear of what you might become without them. The more they see you grow, the more they realize they were never your foundation. They were simply a chapter. And you, in your silence, have already turned the page. You've come to understand one of life's quietest, yet most powerful truths. That distance doesn't just create space, it reveals what was hidden. It shows you who truly respects your boundaries and who only valued your availability. It shows them, perhaps for the first time, who you really were beneath their assumptions. Because silence is not just the absence of noise. It is a mirror that reflects character without distortion. And absence, when chosen with clarity, teaches a lesson no presence ever could. It teaches value. You do not need to raise your voice to be heard. You do not need to explain your worth to those committed to misunderstanding it. Sometimes your greatest power is simply choosing to walk away. Not with bitterness, not with anger, but with calm, steady conviction. The one who walks away without apology, without drama, without chasing closure, holds the final word without ever speaking. That kind of exit echoes longer than any speech. If this message brought you clarity, strength, or a sense of peace, consider subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. The path of inner mastery is quiet, but never walked alone. And if you feel called, share your thoughts below with just 3 words. I walked away. Let this be your reminder. True freedom begins not when others release you, but when you release yourself. And when you do, life doesn't end. It expands. You haven't lost your voice. You've simply learned when silence says more. Stay grounded, stay wise, and I'll see you in the next reflection.